Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Introduction to NLP. And this is our online version that introduces you to the concepts and thinking of NLP. We call this Start NLP. So, I hope you're all well, and I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Alex Morgan, and I'm the co-founder and an NLP trainer at Athens NLP Studies. We are currently offering our life-changing NLP trainings. I am pleased to welcome you today, and I know you're eager to learn. So welcome to this foundation training. This is a training that has been put together because before you become an expert at NLP, and I know that you can do that, you want to have a strong foundation so your thinking and personal growth happens even faster. So I think it's a good idea to begin with thinking a little bit about the foundational layers of NLP. So we want to start NLP and look at the origins and history of NLP. This is one of the first things that gets people curious. Where did NLP come from, and when did it start? Then we are going to go through some important definitions of NLP because I'm sure you want to know what it is in a simple way. We will also look at how you can use NLP so you can take what you learned today and apply it to what you are doing right now in your everyday reality. And I think that's important when learning anything new, and especially when you're learning NLP, because NLP is used widely today, and it's used across all contexts of living. So what you learn, you can implement today. NLP isn't a training that you take, you get the manual in the mail, and you put it somewhere just to collect dust. What NLP is something that when you learn it, you can use it from the moment when you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, because the thinking that you learn and all the learnings you learn will always be with you. And it's super practical. And that's really where I'd like to ask you to be at the end of this training. I want you to feel that you have concepts, tools, methods, techniques, and new ways of thinking that you can go ahead and use right away in any area of life that is important to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about certification because it's a common question we always hear, and you will know how you can go about getting certified in NLP once you complete Start NLP. You will also learn about comfort zones and how you flow and move in and out of your comfort zone. One of the main themes in NLP is empowerment. NLP is all about personal empowerment and really evolving your own consciousness so that you can become completely empowered. We're going to look at a foundational concept and the basis of NLP, which is the NLP communication model. And this is how we create our reality through our 5 senses. I'm going to show you this in a way so you completely understand it. And I know you can understand it. And once you do, you will have the foundation of NLP, so you will easily understand everything else about NLP. We're also going to look at perception is projection. So this is thinking we have that creates the reality that we live in. We're going to think about the mind-body connection. We're going to think about how we look at people and how we look at ourselves as a connected whole. So rather than just thinking about the mind, we think about the whole person, your mind and your body, and how they're connected and how each are invested in your excellence and success. We're also going to think about responsibility and who has a responsibility for change. We are going to think about how we learn So the 4 steps to learning and how that can lead to excellence and the best version of you. We're going to put everything together, so looking at NLP at the practitioner level. Now, NLP, a big part of it is communication. This is obvious because the middle initial of NLP is linguistic. So NLP has lots of language systems to learn. We're going to go through them as we go through Start NLP. And that reminds me of a story that came to me the other day. Have you ever felt curious? I mean, really curious. Like a burning desire to discover something that's just right there, yet at the same time, out of reach from your present understanding and thinking. Have you ever experienced something like that? Can you recall something as simple as being a child, staring excitedly at those beautifully wrapped presents under the Christmas tree? You're carefully assessing shape and size, and perhaps, when nobody was looking, feeling the weight, giving them a shake to see what they sounded like. That's the curiosity I'm referring to. The curiosity to know what's inside. And curiosity is one common theme that every great and every extraordinary thinker in history uses, expresses, activates, and is a master at. They have questions and they want to know the answers. So they explore various avenues of possibility that others simply just let pass by. And that's what made them extraordinary. People like Richard Bandler and John Grinder, the founders of NLP, were curious about linguistics and how simple patterns we use in our language, and if we use them in an elegant way, we can use them, and that could help people transform their thinking. And someone like Virginia Satir was curious about how family dynamics worked and what would happen if she brought lost information back into consciousness. And the greatest hypnotist of all time, Milton Erickson, was curious about physical indicators of change. And Tad James, he was curious too, especially about how negative emotions express themselves in relation to time. And Tony Robbins, he's a curious guy, and he gets curious about how people are motivated, how they're ready to act. And me, I can easily be curious about you and what you want to achieve. I'm curious as to what you think is a challenge, maybe what limiting beliefs you have. And I'm also very curious to know what motivates you. I'm curious about what's inside and how you get motivated. Because when we coach using NLP, we're really curious about how the content of the past has been created. Because we're not concerned about the shiny wrapping and the glittery bows, not the actual content of that past. What we are curious about is how that past exists in the first place, and how what we have inside got to be inside. And all this curiosity, it leads to a willingness to experiment. And it leads to a burning desire to find out more, much more. And there's always so much more to learn, isn't there? At Athens NLP Studies, our mission is your success. The more people that we can support to create the success that they desire in life, And the more we gently touch and nurture with the knowledge and thinking that NLP offers, then the more success that they will share. Have you ever seen a green sea turtle? In particular, a big green sea turtle with blotches and specks on its flippers and head. And as strange as it may sound, people have learned some of their most important lessons about choosing what they do each day from a big green blotched and speckled sea turtle. The big green sea turtle did not tell them anything, and the sea turtle taught them a tremendous amount. People snorkel off the coast of beautiful islands in Hawaii. Often each day, it is spectacular because you can see lots of things in the ocean. Octopus, tuna, eels, and any of these may be new for you to see. There are thousands of other fish too. They are as many colors as you can imagine, anywhere from neon to gray, deep shades of blue, red, yellow, and orange. When you snorkel, it's good to even go 100 feet away from the shore of the beach. You can dive down and notice some rock structures there too. Maybe turn to your right and notice a big green sea turtle. Is this the first time you've seen one in the wild, out in the beautiful ocean? People rise to the surface, clear their snorkel, clean off their mask, and float up to the top of the water to watch a big green sea turtle. They are right underneath you and moving further away from the shore. A person decides to stay on the surface and swim with the big green sea turtle. And it is surprising how they can seem to go so slowly, and at the same time they are paddling, and other times only floating, and a person can't keep up with them. Even if you are wearing fins that give you propulsion power through the water, the big green sea turtle keeps moving further and further away. You can't keep up. After 5 or 10 minutes, the big green sea turtle loses you, so you can swim back to shore. The next day, you can return to the same spot and hope to find another big green sea turtle. Sure enough, after getting into the water, you see all the fish, and afterwards, a big green sea turtle. You can watch them paddle through the coral and rock structures. People follow the big green sea turtle again as they swim away from the beach's shore. It is surprising again to find that a person can't keep up. You realize that the big green sea turtle is pulling ahead, so you stop, float, and watch. It is at this exact moment you can figure out the important lesson. Are you a believer in sea turtles having the capability to teach you a lesson? Or are you doubtful of this part because the way the story is going? You have to become a believer in teaching possibilities, don't you? So what happens next? As a person is floating on the surface, they realize something. When the big green sea turtle was swimming, it associated and connected its movements to the movements of the water. When a wave was coming, the sea turtle would only float and paddle only enough to stay still in the current. It gets better. When the pull of the wave was behind the sea turtle, they'd paddle even faster, so they are taking advantage of the movement of the water. The turtle didn't fight the waves. The turtle used the resources the water gave them. The reason the person hadn't been able to keep up with the big green sea turtle is because they paddled nonstop no matter what way the water was flowing, going, and streaming. At first, this is doable because they can stay with the big green sea turtle, and they even had to slow their paddling for a bit. However, the more they battled against the waves that go in and out, the more strenuous it became. They became tired. When the waves were going out, they didn't have the energy they needed to take full advantage of it. There are plenty of people who are completely passionate about what they do. You know, the ones who seem to spend each day doing what they truly enjoy. These are the ones you notice something about, right? Do you notice something? Or can I tell you something I have noticed? There was once a woman doing sales, and actually she was doing much more. And I want to show you what I noticed about her. She was so happy as someone could be. You know, someone and they just seem genuinely happy. Many people like her enjoy what they are doing. It doesn't come across as false either, because she seemed to know that things will go the way she wants them to. Maybe it is strange to you, like it was to me, when I noticed this, and I thought she seemed lucky. So many good things happened for her. It seemed like they were unexpected or miracles. For example, this one woman I'm thinking of, she is in advertising and sales, and she thought she could land this big account. I'm not sure what the account was for, and I do remember this being a huge deal, and many others before her went for this account and were not successful at it. They tried and failed at getting the account. She decided, it's my turn, and she wants to land it. She worked for a couple weeks, meticulously preparing her presentation, and she received a phone call from a friend from college. The two hadn't spoke or connected for quite some time. They were communicating and catching up like two people do after not connecting for a while. And as they were, she mentions her goal of wanting to land this account. And it turns out the friend from college had another friend who worked at the company the woman was pursuing. One thing leads to another, and a few phone calls later, the three of them meet for dinner. A few weeks after that, she got the account. Is this what I mean with unexpected things happening for people like her? Do they seem to get very lucky? I don't know exactly what it is, because maybe it is coincidence. The thing is, though, if you ask me to think about people who honestly enjoy what they are doing, it seems things like this happen all the time. Does it only happen for people like her? Or has something like this happened to you? I mean, you can suppose it has, and think of a particular time off the top of your head. It's pretty easy to understand, isn't it? Let me give you another example. Imagine you tell someone something, and you can get them to tell other people too. Then these people tell other people, who can tell even more people. After barely any time goes by, your message has a reach that is far wider than the audience you personally had a conversation with. Kind of like passing along a message or email to someone. It is the same concept, only now you are letting people know something you are wanting to do that you seem genuinely happy about, with total congruency and wholeness. First you share it, then they share it with more people, and it is shared with more and more people. Before long, you have a bunch of people who know that you are genuinely happy, and potentially they want to help you or know someone who can. Why are others willing to help? So let's think about the history of NLP. And let's think about neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short. Neuro-linguistic programming has a very long history. And I want to share some of that history with you, because if you understand where NLP has come from, then it helps you get a clear picture and get a good feeling for its nature. And it also helps you to start to think where it will go in the future. So let's think about NLP and where it came from. When we think about the history of NLP, we can go all the way back to 1933 and the work of Alfred Korzybski and he wrote the book Science and Sanity. And this is important in terms of where NLP came from. Because in that book, Korzybski said that almost all psychological problems were the result of the inability of a person to traverse or navigate logical levels. And he thought that in the future, there would be some sort of process that would come along that would actually assist us to describe a human being. And what do you think NLP does? Of course it does that. Then we have Waltzewick, and he was working in the 1950s and interested in linguistics. And he added to the thinking that led NLP towards linguistics. And then we have Gregory Bateson and Jay Haley, who debated ecology. Then there was Fritz Perls, a Gestalt therapist, and he provided the inspiration for the science that we know now as NLP. So the creators of NLP, working around 1975, were Richard Bandler and John Grinder. In 1975, Richard Bandler was a student at the University of Santa Cruz in California, and John Grinder was a linguistics professor. Richard Bandler at that time was really into the concept of Gestalt therapy, and at the time he was editing a book that was about Fritz Perls. And he decided, as he was editing it, going through it, understanding it, and reading it, he thought, I think I could actually do this Gestalt therapy. And so he began to practice it, and he found out that he was very good at it. And as he began to move forward and use all the things that he learned, he realized that he had a specific gift to do something extraordinary, and that extraordinary thing is modeling. And what is modeling? It is being able to take an excellent behavior or skill from an activity and a person and put that excellence inside of yourself and do it too. You can use it and create something out of it. And this is where the notion of NLP being both an attitude and a methodology comes from. Being able to identify really excellent behavior and how that behavior is produced. So you're taking an excellent behavior and putting it on yourself to reproduce the results of excellence. So NLP begins as a methodology and an attitude that is left behind it, a trail of techniques that we know today. NLP was a process of modeling. Richard and John together went out into the world and studied the most prominent and well-known therapists of the day. They wanted to know what these people were doing with their language to have people make almost magical changes to their behavior and thinking just through natural conversation. And the three major people that were modeled to create NLP were Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, and Fritz Perls. They were modeled by Richard Bandler and John Grinder in the early days of NLP. So Richard and John looked at what creates magical change in someone. What is it that really made the difference? How can you simply by using words make a change in somebody? And it begins with curiosity. They wanted to know what's going on behind what's going on. And the attitude of curiosity is extremely important in NLP because they ask themselves the question, what is it that makes this so successful? How is it possible that this person in these circumstances could produce this particular behavior? And so a willingness to experiment with NLP is also equally as important as being really curious. They had a willingness to try things out and thought, how can we see if this is going to work? So they modeled Milton Erickson, and he was the world's greatest hypnotherapist at the time. He was single-handedly responsible for taking hypnosis off the stage, off the sideshows, and into a professional and clinical setting. He created a respectable practice that would create change in people. And in 1954, the American Medical Association tried to revoke Erickson's medical license because of what he was doing with hypnotherapy. By 1957, he'd done so much work that he convinced them that hypnosis was a respectable and effective means of effecting change. And in 1958, they issued a statement which approved the use of hypnosis by well-trained and licensed practitioners. So John and Richard thought Erickson was somebody worth taking notes from, and they really wanted to study him. They also studied Virginia Satir, a family therapist, and she would magically heal the wounds within family groups, and they modeled her. And most of what we know about one of the language patterns that we learn, the meta model, was a technique used by Virginia Satir. And we'll think about meta model later when you come to the NLP practitioner training. What Virginia Satir was doing was getting really specific with the people she worked with. And Bandler and Grinder decided that the way to cause people to change was to get more specific, and they created the meta model, an overview of all linguistic grammar. At the same time, Milton Erickson, the hypnotherapist, was getting artfully vague, and this was different. So they created Milton model language. Again, patterns that we'll look at in your NLP practitioner training. Around 1979 to 1980, John and Richard have produced 4 books about NLP. Structure of Magic, Volumes 1 and 2, and The Hypnotic Patterns of Milton Erickson, Volumes 1 and 2. And at this point, NLP wasn't really fully developed. It wasn't really well known. And it wasn't well known until they uncovered and started to study the work of Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Pavlov introduced the notion of anchoring, which is the process of stimulus response. And he published his first book in 1903 called Conditioned Reflexes. The stimulus response and conditioned reflexes ultimately became behavioral psychology. And the anchoring process that we know in NLP came directly from here. In 1979, one of the most important books in NLP was published, and it's called Frogs to Princes. And this discussed changing people's personal history. And this is the first time that the groundbreaking concept of looking at eye patterns was published. At the same time, Richard and John were joined by Robert Dilts, and they worked together to form NLP Volume 1. And this is where the whole concept of strategies came into play. And Delosier also co-authored this book with them. In 1982, another important book, Transformations, was published, and then the book Reframing came out at the same time. And these were all focusing on language. Then Richard and John parted company, and nothing happened with NLP for a while. Richard went out to Hawaii in 1985, wrote the book Using Your Brain for a Change, and Magic in Action, one of the more important books in NLP. Then in 1988, Wyatt Woodsmall and Tad James came together to write the book Timeline Therapy and the Basis of Personality. And that work around time and timelines forms parts of the extended version of NLP that many of us learn today. As you can see, NLP comes from a really respectable body of knowledge with a background founding in a number of intellectual disciplines. It's a study of how to produce results, and you can produce results in business, in education, in therapy, in coaching, and of course, in sports, and even in relationships.